Hey there, House here. With the NBA season in full swing, I wanted to take some time to talk about the top teams so far, as well as some teams that, frankly, have been a disappointment. First, on to some teams that are near the top that you shouldn't be surprised about. Those teams are the Nets, the Heat, the Warriors, and the Jazz. Let's start with the Nets. They have had their fair share of issues during this season without a doubt. With Kyrie Irving first not getting vaccinated and then missing a solid chunk of the start of the season to now only allowed to play in the road games for the Nets. He's become a very expensive part-time player. Now, with Kevin Durant expected to miss the next month plus with a knee injury and Irving unable to help at a full-time capacity, this will make these upcoming games that much more difficult for the Nets. Not to mention, what happens when it comes to playoff time? Irving can only play on the road. And what happens if they have a matchup against the Knicks? They both play in New York, which means that Irving would have to miss that whole series unless he gets vaccinated, which he won't do. Needless to say, the Nets could be in some trouble this year. Next we have the Heat, who have dealt with a lot of injuries to star players as well as an outbreak of COVID. Even with all of that, they are finally looking healthy and currently near the top seed in the conference, thanks to the help of Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Kyle Lowry, and Tyler Hero. Assuming that they can stay healthy for the remainder of this season into the postseason, the only people that can stand in their way is themselves. The Warriors are a team that you can usually assume will be at the top of the league more times than not in recent history. With players like Steph Curry, they have some other complementary players like Andrew Wiggins and Jordan Poole. However, they have been without James Wiseman and Klay Thompson for most of the season, but without those guys to bolster their roster, they are still battling for the number one overall seed. Klay has returned to the Warriors, and assuming that he can bring himself back into form after missing over 2 years to injury, as well as the eventual return of big man James Wiseman, unless they trade him, this will only help their playoff push. Lastly, on this list, we have the Jazz, who, whenever they have Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, and shooters like Jordan Clarkson, they do pretty well for themselves. There are some that speculate that the Jazz championship window is beginning to close, but I don't see that just yet. I see a roster that can bring this team back to being the tops in the league. Now, I want to talk about some teams that have really disappointed so far. Those teams are the Knicks, the Hawks, the Lakers, and the Pelicans. The Knicks, coming off of a playoff berth last year for the first time since 2013, were on the verge of playing good, consistent basketball. This year has been anything than that. With injuries to some reserve players to inconsistency out of both RJ Barrett and Julius Randle, it is easy to point those fingers. They did make a splash nearly a month before the trade deadline by trading with the Atlanta Hawks to acquire Cam Reddish, Solomon Hill, and a second-round pick for Kevin Knox, who is a reserve player, and a first-round pick. This seemed like a no-brainer for the Knicks to acquire a shooter like Reddish for that asking price. Plus, they couldn't pass up the opportunity to reunite college teammates Barrett and Reddish. I expect this acquisition to help them out a bunch, but only time will tell. On to the Hawks, a team that just traded away Cam Reddish have been surprisingly bad this year. After making the playoffs for the first time since 2017 and making it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, they have been anything but a playoff team currently. I truly wish I could pinpoint why they're playing so badly. Unfortunately, I cannot, and as of now, they are far away from the team that played in the Eastern Conference last year. On to the Lakers. The Lakers are a team that thought they could bring in a bunch of current and former All-Stars and think that it would work. Their lineup consists of LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Russell Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony, and Dwight Howard. Most of these guys are past their prime or injury prone or both. LeBron-led teams found a way to win in the past even when he was shorthanded and doing nearly everything himself. I suppose that he's now starting to show his age in this league, with the Lakers being without Anthony Davis and receiving some inconsistent play out of Westbrook, Anthony, and Howard. It was a head-scratching move for the Lakers to bring in all of these players that were in the later stages of their career, and now they're paying for it. Last up, we have the Pelicans, a young and exciting team showcasing one of the most physical and entertaining second-year player last year in Zion Williamson. With a lot of expectations before the season started for this team, they have come out and fallen flat on their face. To be fair, Williamson has missed the entire season so far, and there is no timetable for his return just yet. That meant that Brandon Ingram was supposed to step up and help this team win as much as he could. He hasn't been up to the task just yet. With more minutes and more stress on his plate to perform in the absence of Zion, he is averaging less points, field goal percentage, and three-point percentage. Now that could change with the eventual return of Zion, but I know this is not what the Pelicans fan base expected as the season approached just a few short months ago. The good news for all of these teams is that the NBA added 4 additional playoff slots this year, so these teams still have a chance to turn the season around and make the playoffs. Now the last thing I wanted to touch on are some teams that have been a true surprise this year. Those teams are the Grizzlies, Cavaliers, and the Bulls. The Grizzlies are a team with a phenomenal player in Ja Morant, who can take them very deep into the playoffs any season for the remainder of his career, assuming he can stay healthy. He has missed a few games this year, but his team has rallied around themselves and won without him. Doing that has shot them into the top 4 in the Western Conference as a legitimate threat to any team when Morant's on the floor. In just his 3rd year, he is finding his groove and showing no signs of stopping. Watch for Morant and the Grizzlies to challenge the top teams in the Western Conference like the Suns and the Warriors. The next team that I want to talk about are the Cavaliers, a team that finished last year near the bottom of the Eastern Conference, and without their top point guard in Colin Sexton for the year, they have played extraordinarily well. With the steady veteran presence of Kevin Love and the breakout play of Darius Garland, they are a threat to many teams in the Eastern Conference for the remainder of this year and into the playoffs. The last team on my list are the Bulls, a team that if you would have asked anyone before the season started if they finished in the 4th or 5th seed in the conference, that would be a win. They are currently sitting atop of the Eastern Conference, with premier play out of both Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, who has found a way to turn back the clock as well as assert himself into the MVP conversation. The Bulls are a tough out so far. They have been hit with the injury/COVID bug over this past month or so, but assuming that their key players can come back and continue to play well, I don't see any reason for the Bulls to finish below the 3rd seed. Well, that's about all I wanted to cover on this episode. It does feel a little weird to talk about something other than football for the first time in months. Thank you for tuning into the House Report. If there were some teams that I did not list that you believe could fall into one of those categories, please leave their names in the comment section. And for all my betting friends out there, remember, you win some and you lose some, but the house always wins.